And our second item here is approval of the March 18th meeting summary. I'll take a motion to approve the meeting minutes as given.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? All right, it passes. On to number 3, we have a transportation improvement amendment presentation, right? So Adam's going to lead us through that. All right, Adam, it's all yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. So today we have 2025.050. This is programming FTA 5311 and FTA 5339 grant awards, along with their associated non-federal match. What we've got going on here, historically, we have programmed these administratively, but there was a small cost overrun between the time of the award and when we came time to program the match. It's about $6,000, but we wanted to err on the side of caution and bring this forward formally for your consideration. And we were looking for a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, does anybody on the board have any questions for Adam? All right, I'll entertain a motion then to approve the amendment.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Okay, the motion passes. The amendment is approved.
Thank you.
And on to number 4, we have the PAG resolution regarding regional funding sweeps. And it's going to be Mike and Jamie, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So this is an item that want to memorialize as a part of the crafting of the RTA next plan. We had established, or I'll say the TMC did, and performed or developed a recommendation to the board for the funding sweeps, if you will, the regional dollars to end in 2031. It's actually a footnote on the RTA next plan. Okay. And so I had a request from one of the regional council members suggesting that we should memorialize that, make sure it's clear to everyone that that is the spirit and intent. And I said, hey, that's a great idea. We'll bring that up. So what's before you is really a recommendation to the regional council for this resolution and ultimately the RTA board as well. So just keep in mind, though, that the way that the language is on the ballot, it says through 2031. And the amount that's in the ballot is different, or not different, separate. And so what I suggest is that we say that the spirit and intent of this is for regional dollars to be allocated to the amount that's on the ballot, which is intended to be through 2031. So here's my thought there. If the dollars are greater than what's on the ballot before 2031, then the obligation's met. Okay. But if it's not, and we're in 2031 and we haven't made the ballot amount, then we're going to need to go to 2032 and keep putting those dollars to that so that the ballot amount is in fact carried forward. I don't expect that to be the case, but I wanted to put that out to you so that the money, quite frankly, is the more important piece than the date. And I think that we can reference the date, and I think what's before you is that. So, Jamie, did you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Mr. Ortega. I think you've summarized it well, but happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
All right. Do we have any, pretty straightforward. Do we have any questions for Mike or for Jamie?
I just have one, I think, Mr. Chair. So I understand this and I appreciate it, but we're not going to be able to do the same thing at the end of, at the end of the 20-year program. I mean, at the end of 20 years, it's done regardless of if we've gotten all the money or not, right? So I'm just trying to figure out if, it's good for the goose is good for the gander. I mean, our intent is to have these things play out. So I'm just curious why this should be treated differently than the actual whole program itself. Because at 20 years, it's done whether you got the money or not. So,
Mr. Chairman,
yeah, thanks.
yeah, I get it, Mr. Chairman, Shane. I think the bottom line here is the spirit and intent that's outlined and quite frankly explicitly on the ballot shows a certain amount coming from regional funds. And I think the concern is that if it's not explicit in a resolution, that it could be interpreted that if you're in 2031, even though we've gotten more money, that should go to the RTA plan. And that's not the spirit and intent. And so the idea is to really codify or memorialize that so that it's based on the dollars, which are intended to be through 2031. But it is, we'll use the term cap, based on the conversations that happened at the regional council. And this memorializes it, Shane. That's really all that's going on there.
Any other questions from the board? All right, then I'll entertain a motion to approve the resolution. So moved, and do I have a second? So moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Resolution passes. All right, item number 5 is future agenda items. Any future agenda items going once, twice? And we are on to adjournment. We are adjourned.
A lull here. I wanted to just throw out to you again, there was many conversations about the times for these meetings. And so we went from 8 to 8:30 and trying to accommodate folks. It seems like 8:30 works for most folks at this point. I think there was a thought that maybe we'd go to 8. Before you leave here today, if you could just let us know if 8:30 works better for you. I'd like to keep them consistent. We were trying to, maybe seeing how it would work, but if you all could just let us know, I'd sure appreciate it. Thank you.
I thought it worked nicely, and if you serve breakfast like that every day, I'll show up every day for meetings.
Sir, we need you every day here at the RTA.
All righty, and with that, I'll go ahead and call to order the Technical Management Committee of RTA. That wasn't me. What'd I do? I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of March 18th, if anyone has had a chance to review those.
So moved.
Thank you. It's been moved. Is there a second? And seconded. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you very much. RTA quarterly analysis, item 3, Mr. Ortega.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is, we'll call it a little more detail for you on the quarterly analysis. You saw the thumbnail sketch that we provided last time on the approach. What we have for you today is a deeper dive. What you will see next time is even a deeper dive than this, but this will be an opportunity for you to see where we're at, what we're doing, how we're approaching the entirety of delivery. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick. He's got a really good presentation I think you'll appreciate. Rick?
Fantastic. Thank you, Mike. Good morning, members of the committee. We're going to do similar to what we've done before and what you saw in March, kind of a tag team approach amongst all of us covering the whole breadth of the program. So as a reminder, our quarterly analysis and reporting presentation is first and foremost to ensure that there's solid understanding of the activities all underway. In addition, it also provides an opportunity to engage with our committees and ultimately the board on any issues, challenges, or potential opportunities that may arise. So the first part of our presentation is going to be a review of the financial aspects of the plan. I'd like to introduce Jamie Brown, Director of Strategic Planning, Programming, and Policy, who will provide an overview of our activities and efforts we currently have underway. Jamie, the floor is all yours.
Great. Thank you, Rick. Following the approval by voters, revenue collection was initiated April 1st, 2026. Key activities that have been underway include the following: reallocation of federal funds to key projects that will already contain a federal nexus and therefore will need to adhere to the additional requirements. Working closely with the ADOT team members to establish a 20-year funding plan, including the various ADOT projects in conjunction with the 5 interchange projects contained in RTA Next. This will be discussed more in the retreat portion of today's meeting. Also developing an amendment to the FY 25 through 29 Transportation Improvement Program, which will add new projects like the Moore Road TI and will rebalance the programming of RTA 1 projects, shifting funds into the program years that better match the delivery schedule. As we transition into the fall, we will be looking to initiate the development of the FY 28 through 2032 TIP, targeting final approval in May of 2027. And finally, work on the FY 27 RTA budget is underway. Thank you, Rick.
Thank you, Jamie. Appreciate it. I would like to now transition into a preview of our voter approved plan and first start off by focusing on some of the key activities that are happening at the overall program level. In order to get activities underway as quickly as possible, advanced authorizations have been provided to the City of Tucson, Town of Sahuarita, and Town of Oro Valley. And this will allow those activities with longer lead times, such as our consultant procurements, to get underway. Our team has also been working to identify potential opportunities to streamline and simplify IGA processes so activities can be advanced more quickly. And you're going to hear more details on that activity in the subsequent presentation during the retreat portion of our meeting today. You've also heard previous references to an advanced delivery team or a resource team, and that will be utilized to help identify any issues, impediments, roadblocks, or possible opportunities. And the intent is to reconcile those issues that might affect delivery in advance of the production team. And you'll hear more about that also during the retreat portion of the meeting. Lastly, we're continuing to work closely with our various project teams to provide whatever assistance may be needed in support of their delivery efforts, including the possibility of serving as a lead partner to deliver specific projects or particular program roles and responsibilities. I'd like to now dive into the individual elements and provide a more detailed update on activities, plus a preview of what's going to be forthcoming. So in the roadway element for the 2006 plan projects, as we shared back in March, we have several roadway projects nearing completion with several new ones that are going to be getting underway. For the 2026 plan, we have so far provided project jurisdictions advance authorization on 2 of the Drexel projects that had actually gotten activities underway prior to the election using alternate funding sources. And then along with La Villita in the town of Sahuarita and Shannon Road up in Oro Valley. I wanted to alert you to, on continuing the roadway element, one of the challenges that has arisen is on the Sonoran corridor, and specifically where public comments received from the communities in the southern part of the region, such as Green Valley and Sahuarita, have expressed concerns regarding impacts associated with the current connection to I-19. Our staff will be meeting with affected jurisdictions, along with ADOT, to discuss these concerns in detail and identify ways to resolve them. And we'll continue to share updates with you at future meetings. This is something so that we just wanted to give you a heads up that we're aware of this. We didn't want you caught off guard, wondering what's going on, hear about it and go, well, how would that get by everybody? It's not getting by us. That's the whole purpose of these yellow phased items. For safety, ADA, and the active transportation element, no activities have been initiated at this time. However, subsequent to this packet being sent out, we did receive a request from Oro Valley to fund a set of intersection improvements on that. So we have that in place. Didn't update the slides, but wanted to verbally recognize that. As a reminder, we're not going to be using the call for projects process that had been utilized a lot during the first plan. Jurisdictions are free to submit qualifying candidate projects as they come available and within the allocations and spirit intent of the particular elements description. Pre-authorization has been provided to the City of Tucson to get pavement rehabilitation activities underway. The city has developed an initial list of candidate projects for their allocation, as well as an initial list of projects for the upcoming year, fiscal year 27. South Tucson has also identified a candidate project on 10th Avenue, and initial scope and cost estimates have been developed. And it's key to note that the kickoff activities for RTA Next are associated and focused on these pavement rehabilitation activities. And you'll see many of these firing up in the upcoming summer months. So we're going to be coming right out of the gate with a lot of these efforts and activities to get underway. For the environmental element, the 2006 plan project efforts, the SR 86 wildlife crossing that I provided an overview back in March, we'll be reinitiating the design activities now following the approval of the revised concept, plus our key maintenance agreements by the chair of the Tohono O'odham Nation. For the 2026 plan allocation, no activities have been initiated at this time. However, it is important to note that the Wildlife Linkages Working Group will be convened in the upcoming months, which is a key component and a key benefit or a key necessity associated with helping us proceed with this element due to the specialized nature and kind of the unique operations of this particular aspect. For the transit update element, I'd like to introduce Thomas Robertson, our Public Transportation Management Analyst, to provide an update on the transit element. Thomas, it's all yours.
Absolutely. Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Sir Chair. Thank you, members of the committee. Thomas Robertson here with the public transportation side of things here with the PAG RTA. So talking about our Q2 and Q3 accomplishments so far, we adopted a new contract with MTM Services that provides for our Sun Shuttle services, both fixed route, dial ride, as well as paratransit. And with that, our new contractor has adopted a fleet of 54 brand new paratransit vehicles that I'm sure we've all seen driving around Tucson so far. Otherwise, the new service providers have been quite favorable with our riders. Our average ride rating is about a 4.8 out of 5, and our riders of the paratransit service have been raving about the additional quality of service in comparison to our prior contractor. And with that, our on-time performance has also increased from 90% to about 95% across all modes of transit, that being the fixed route motor bus services and the demand response dial-a-ride and paratransit services. And with that, we have a 15% increase in overall paratransit ridership and a 16% increase in fixed route ridership over Q2 and Q3. Next slide, kindly. So for the 2026 plan, we have the pre-authorization provided to the City of Tucson for the high-capacity transit planning for the BRT system on North Stone. That's personally my favorite plan of RTA Next. Otherwise, ongoing Sunlink operations, as well as continued RTA funding for the expanded transit services identified in the 2006 RTA plan. Additionally, we have collaboration with the City of Tucson on transit funding allocations, safety and security, as well as development of the PAG short-range transit plan. The scope overview is complete, and our RFP for that plan is currently underway. Next slide, please. So let's talk about some of the challenges we're facing. First thing we're going to note here is the strike through on the 178%. While we do indeed have an increase in fuel costs, we discovered an error in our invoices for our fuel contracts. So it's not that 178% increase. It is significantly less than that, but still wanted to include that in there. Otherwise, for our contractor, due to the increase in demand, there has been a 53% increase in transportation network company cost, or Uber and Lyft cost, used to supplement demand during our peak hours of the paratransit service over Q3. And given that we have a new contract and they are providing a higher level of service, the new contract cost increased by 29% in comparison to our prior contract. Please note that at the end of the contract, in our choice of contracts, there was only about a 10% difference in cost in our choice of contractors, a part of the RFP process. And we see down here a graph showing the expenditures by tip in aggregate versus the aggregate transit budget. Please know that this is the budget for 2026 before we took on the new contract with the increased costs. While in our own internal budget for the year, we're over budget. When compared to the transit element as a whole, we're still operating within constraints. Next slide, please. So next steps for our service, we're going to look to analyze the service for potential seasonality in our demand. Given how hot the summers here are in Tucson, we do see changes in our paratransit use as well as demand response services. And with the new contractor, we're going to see how they handle that and how that looks, given that it's their first year of operations. Additionally, our team is researching cost efficiency measures for both fixed route and paratransit services to see where else we can find additional efficiencies in terms of providing more service at a lower cost for our passengers. And I think that concludes it.
Fantastic. Thank you, Thomas. I would like to now transition into the performance aspects and provide a more detailed overview of what you're going to be able to expect and see as this portion of the analysis progresses, not only through this meeting, but in the upcoming meetings through the rest of the year. So one of the most important aspects about improving our overall delivery is going to be establishing this delivery strategy at the onset of a project. And this is going to include the detailed information on key performance metrics that have been identified, covering both schedule as well as financial attributes, and as well as the anticipated cash flow necessary for detailed financial oversight. Our goal is working with the jurisdictions on this to have those departments and responsible entities analyze the project conditions in advance to then establish the vision, delivery strategy, and assemble a team at the time then to come forward and help implement that accordingly. So it's a slight mindset shift, but we know that's going to provide better overall benefit, enhance the overall delivery activity on this. Because any RTA project in which we're contributing funds represents a partnership between us and the entity on that. The complete project delivery information will be needed regardless of the amount of RTA funding. So there's been questions that have been raised up from some of the jurisdictions going, how are we going to track or watch when there's only a portion of the funding, or it's going to be a joint funded type of effort? And because this represents the overall project, which is the partnership between it, we're going to want to make sure that we're tracking all those attributes and not just focusing in on the individual cost item on that. So that'll give us the benefit of saying we're watching the whole project, we're in that together, and we're making sure that we can address any challenges in a joint manner. We will continue to utilize our regular project update meetings with our teams, the jurisdictions, and through those frequent updates, we'll be able to jointly share any information regarding issues, challenges, or opportunities for any schedule revisions or financial revisions that may be needed as we go forward. Delivery matrix we first shared in March will be a critical component of how we monitor and track our various items. The new projects that are going to be initiated will include this information, and then we're also going to be working with our partner jurisdictions to complete the applicable information for the 2006 plan projects that are also underway and align with our current activity status. So we'll be able to bring you a full picture utilizing this tool, technique, and method. As a refresher, the color coding protocol we're using is where green indicates everything's on track, no real discussions needed, everything's moving forward as we expect. Yellow indicates there's items that warrant a preview, heads up on what may be coming, much like what we mentioned with the Sonoran corridor overview during the roadway element. And red indicates a detailed discussion is warranted and decision-making or direction or action may be appropriate or provided or necessary. We introduced this at the March meeting as well, and this is kind of our recommendation summary. At this time, based on the information we've shared, staff has no recommendations to share. However, as you previously heard, we will be closely monitoring the Sonoran corridor plus the transit cost items, so there may be future recommendations coming at forthcoming meetings. As a reminder, this is a standing opportunity for TMC and/or CART to make any recommendations directly to the board on the information and materials you've heard presented here. We do anticipate having the full performance report available at the fall quarterly analysis, and we may include recommendations at that time to be able to share with you and make those in a joint format. As we continue to provide this analysis and reporting each quarter, we're going to continue to use this format, focusing on the financial aspects and providing you the necessary overview, sharing information on the project activity, and then the analysis of the plan performance and the delivery activities going forward. So this is going to continue with the theme we've got going on, the formatting, and the overall approach that we'll be utilizing. With that, that concludes our presentation. Hand it back to you, Mike, for any closing thoughts, and we're available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I think we'll start off with just if there are any questions on the presentation. We're going to get into a lot more detail on the, when we get into the retreat, there's a whole bunch of detail that we're going to look at and look for some guidance on some of those pieces. But is there any comment or question on the presentation that we've just made?
Really more just a comment. Really appreciate the work that's gone into this already. You can see the structure coming together, the organization of it, and I think it's going to set us up very nicely. So I appreciate it. I know there's been a lot of work that's gone into it by you and your staff, so greatly appreciated.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I do want to comment back. We've got a great team. You can see the professionalism here, and we've got some folks that really are passionate about it, but they know what they're doing, and we're going to work hard not only to provide that structure, but also make sure you see us as a resource to help you in ultimately delivering this program. Thank you.
No, that's good. Thanks, Mike and team. Thanks for the information. Appreciate it. And exactly what Terry said, a lot of great work happening. Would like to have some conversation with your group, Mike, about advanced work authorization for some of the county projects. So if we can get that lined up, that would be super. And then just a question, more broadly, it's been commented out in the public space about the transit allocations and the proportionality to various jurisdictions, and wanted to know just a little more about how and where those conversations are expected to happen.
I'm going to go ahead and take that. So just to refresh your memory, as a part of the admin code, there was an Appendix A, and the Appendix A actually outlines the distribution of dollars per element per jurisdiction. And so those have already been established. So, and if you recall, I'm sure all of you read in great detail my memo that I sent to the board. It was an attachment, but take a look at that because it really establishes what those allocations are. But more specific to your question, the conversations have just started. We have not actually reached out to the city yet. They're our biggest partner in this. We plan to do that very shortly. We've been looking at things internally. I will tell you that the cost item that was mentioned in the presentation really is of concern to me because I don't see a lot of room for expansion. And that was one of the things that as we went through and went through our exercises, there was an expectation there would be expansion of service. What we're really focused on is, and by the way, that excludes safety and security and some of the specific line items, but the core business, because of the fuel costs, because of insurance costs that have gone up, I'm concerned that we're gonna struggle to provide the existing service, at least for the short term. And so part of the conversations that we're having is how can we be efficient? And that was a bullet point that Thomas mentioned. How can we be more efficient with the provision of our service? Now, ultimately, once we have our ducks in a row internally, we will then be having conversations with all of you, those of you that are affected. I know there's questions about the MOE. I know there's questions about fare credits. All of those pieces will be, at least to my satisfaction, in detail that I can present to you, and then we can have a conversation. But right now, quite frankly, we're just looking at what does it look like going forward to provide the same service, and then what's the delta for potential additional service. I don't mean to be a wet blanket. I think that we're just being realistic in terms of the costs that we're seeing today. And I will tell you, it's great to have 15 and 16% increases in paratransit and fixed route because we've got a lot more efficiency, but there's an added cost to that. And so it's great. It's wonderful that we have an amazing contractor, but if we can't afford it, then that's a conversation we've got to have. So those are all pieces that are ongoing. We'll certainly engage you all when it's time to do that. And by the way, that time is probably the next week or two because we're very, very close at this point. And we'll be reaching out to City, Oro Valley, and the county mostly because those are the ones that are mostly affected by that. I'm sorry to be so long-winded, but I wanted to make sure you got the background on it.
Madam Chair, Mike, is the reinstitution affairs on the table?
Madam Chair, I feel like I'm in a public meeting when I was doing the RTA Next presentations. So that is a policy decision that's been made by the City of Tucson Mayor and Council. We don't influence that at this point. So we have assumed that will continue at a no fare or no charge to fares going forward at this point.
As a follow-up, would we be able to, because we have a fixed rate in which we get reimbursed for the money that we spend on our paratransit, and that has a cap. Of course, with the increased fuel costs, that's in turn making our internal contribution even higher. Would individual jurisdictions be able to veer from where the city is on this and be able to institute maybe our own fare for our own system?
Madam Chair, my understanding is there is some flexibility there. If you would be okay with me exploring that a little bit, and I can report back to you all. My understanding is that the City of Tucson obviously is in control of their incorporated limits and the way that fees are charged or not. But there is opportunity outside of the City of Tucson for fairs, but I don't know exactly the detail. I'd like to get a little more or better understanding of that before I can give you an absolute answer.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, Mr. Ortega, I would second that. I'd like to know a little bit more about that. So just so you know, it's coming from more than one jurisdiction. I'd at least like to have some additional information.
Madam Chair, happy to do that. I know that we didn't really explore that. There was a policy decision early on that because the city had gone away from fairs that the region would, but we're happy to look at what can that separation be and what does that look like? Happy to do that.
Madam Chair. Earlier in the presentation, Rick, there was a comment that City of Tucson had gotten pre-authorization already, and I think South Tucson had a project listed. Are those the only jurisdictions that have thus far received pre-authorization?
Sahuarita was also in the mix.
On that?
Yeah, that was in the roadway. So we broke it out per element.
I missed that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I tried to highlight within each element, and Thomas did too on the transit component. But Sahuarita, the city, Oro Valley, South Tucson, and we've been in contact with Department of Transportation staff within Pima County on getting theirs together as well.
Thank you.
So those are the ones that have come through with that.
All right, hang on because we're getting ready. So during Rick's presentation, he made a comment that said, and he used the word a slight mind shift, which I would suggest is probably an understatement. What we're really looking for is a major shift in how we approach things. And we have pretty much blown up the entirety of our systems and said we're starting over, we're going to rebuild them. And what you're going to see today is some of that. And when you look at the magnitude of what is in front of us, and you start to realize that we've got a lot of work as a region. And I gave you some figures in that memorandum a bit ago, but I want to refresh your memory on it. Right now, today, we are expected to spend about $220 million a year, every year for 20 years. Okay, that translates into, if you take it on a daily basis, $602,000 a day based on 365 days. But as my colleague, Mr. Dilly made clear, we don't work 365. So if you look at it just in work days, some people don't work. But if you look at a work day, okay, which you work at, and that assumes no holidays, no vacation, it's $846,000 a day. I'm not trying to be dramatic there. I'm just telling you, we've got a monumental task in front of us. And so it will require all of us firing on all cylinders, working together, partnering with each other, helping each other, shoring each other up on every aspect of this, which means we're gonna really do things differently. We have to. Because to refresh your memory, we only spend between 50 and 70 million today. And so when you drive around the community and people complain about road construction, just multiply that times 3 or 4, and that's what we're going to start seeing. So when we really look at the detail of how you do that, how you approach that, how you structure it, there's a lot of pieces. The complexity of them start to become pretty obvious very quickly. So I wanted to start off the conversation just to suggest to you that we're on uncharted territory here, and we understand that, and we're probably going to make some mistakes. I use the word probably, but we're going to make mistakes, but we're going to need grace, because understand the spirit and intent of this is to figure out how we deliver the program. Now, I will also tell you that I've challenged the staff that we're not delivering this in 20 years. We're delivering this in 18 years. Because I don't want to be having the conversation in the 19th year about why we didn't finish projects like we had to do this past year. That's unacceptable, and we're not going to do that. And so the goal now is to finish it in 18 years. And so it will require different mindset. So I would change the word slight to radical. It's a radically different mindset on how we approach this. And I want you to think about that. The other piece to it that I think will be important is communication. And I understand that sometimes these meetings are tough and become onerous and that, but I'm really going to ask that you recognize the magnitude and how that translates into all of us getting together and chatting about this. The last thing I'll leave you with before I turn it over to some of the team to make some presentations is this will be PAG's priority. And so we've had conversations at the regional council about doing other things. I'm going to pitch to them that we maybe pause some of those other thoughts and say, hey, you know what? Those are great ideas, but right now, delivery of the RTA has got to be first and foremost. It's got to be our priority. And establishing that foundation for success starts today. And so when you start to look at some of the numbers and you start to look at cash flow, you're going to recognize that we really don't have time to be doing other things at this point, is the way I see it, without significant infusion of other capital. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the staff. We've got a whole group of folks that are going to chat here. I'm really pleased with how we are coming together in terms of the team. So I think first up, we're going to talk about the IGA, and I'll turn it over to Melanie Lawson to lead us with that. Melanie?
Yes, good morning. Just give Isa a moment here. So we, as Mike said, looking for different ways that we can improve and some of the internal processes, how can we improve that so that the RTA is not the holdup? So we looked at the IGA and that process, and we blew it up and we've rebuilt it. So our goal again is to reduce administrative burden. And in order to do that, we separated the IGA into two components. So there is the IGA portion, which will cover the relationship between the RTA and the jurisdiction. And then we've created the project charter process, which will be separate from the IGA, and that will manage the details within the projects. It's much more streamlined. The charters are approved via a jurisdiction appointed representative. And so that will reduce the amount of time that is spent in committee meetings, having to take IGAs back to your own mayor and council and get it approved. And it'll just be a little more nimble. And then there will still be the increased accountability with the quarterly tracking, as you just saw. So here's a visual overview of the IGA and project charter process. So there will be a master or primary IGA, again, that will govern the relationship between the RTA and the jurisdiction. That will cover all of the information that doesn't change throughout the life of the 20-year program. Then we would have that with each jurisdiction. That covers all the projects within your jurisdiction. Within that, each project charter would include a project scope, schedule, cash flow, and performance matrix, financial tables that we create with information that you submit, and then also roles and responsibilities. Here's where we could differentiate if the RTA is doing early right-of-way acquisition, for example. That could be included in the project charter. So the IGA process wouldn't change significantly just what is in the IGA. We just separated out some of the information. So here's a visual of the approval process. The RTA would initiate the IGA, again, to cover all of the projects within your jurisdiction. RTA legal review and the jurisdiction legal review would still occur. It would go to the RTA board for approval and back to your own jurisdiction or council for approval and signature, and then it's an executed IGA. Ideally, that kind of sits for the life of the program. It can still be amended if something within the relationship changes, but it's not being updated every time there's a new project. Now we have the project charter process. So this is for a specific project in the RTA plan within your jurisdiction. We're developing a template, which I'll show you in a few slides. And that will include scope, schedule, performance matrix, a financial table, and then also roles and responsibilities. The lead agency develops that charter. We work back and forth with you a little bit to coordinate the review, make sure it meets the requirements within the RTA plan, it aligns with the administrative code. We develop the financial tables with cash flow information that you've provided to us. We mutually agree on the scope and everything provided. And then that is signed by the jurisdiction's designated authority, and that authority is designated in the IGA. And then that's also signed by the executive director. We then use that charter as the baseline to enter into our database to start the quarterly reporting and start the oversight. So that's the baseline that then we're reporting against. If there are major changes to the schedule, for example, as defined in the administrative code or to the scope, then you can update the project charter. You can update finances, roles and responsibilities, and it is a little more nimble. So then it would just go back through staff to make sure everything is still aligned, and then it can be signed by the jurisdiction appointed representative and the executive director. So here was just a swim lane diagram of the different roles and responsibilities for staff. So we wanted to just be clear that the lead agency is responsible for initiating the project charter process. As we go through these first projects and finalize the template, we will help with that, and we can help you fill that out. We will use the cash flow information, as I mentioned, to develop those financial tables. We all mutually agree that it aligns with the spirit and intent and everything outlined in the RTA plan. And then it's signed by the executive director and, again, that appointed representative. We enter that into that database. We start reporting on it quarterly. And then as part of that quarterly update, the staff can often jointly present with Rick or our staff and provide those updates to TMC, CART, and the RTA board. And then the jurisdiction is responsible for submitting invoices. And we are working on a checklist to just make it explicitly clear kind of what's required when submitting an invoice so that we can reduce time on the back end and don't have to go back and forth asking for additional information. Try to make it very clear up front. You submit the invoice and then we can reimburse. So here's a brief implementation schedule. We're rolling this out, to you right now. We have some charter template drafts, which I can show next on the screen. We used information provided for the projects that were submitted as part of that pre-authorization. We will plan to review this concept with the board at the June 4th meeting, and then we can begin drafting IGAs for each jurisdiction, use those summer months to go back and forth and have the legal teams review the IGAs, and we can continue to work with jurisdictions and develop those project charters with the goal of having each jurisdiction's IGA executed in September, and then those projects executed as they're initiated by the jurisdictions. So with that, I can take questions or I can continue to walk through some of the examples.
Thank you, Melanie, for the presentation. I have a question starting with the master IGA. So did I understand correctly that all of our projects in the RTA Next plan will be in that master IGA?
Madam Chair, Sam, no. The master IGA is the governance, the relationship between the RTA and the agency.
Okay.
The project charters will then be established for each project, and it will apply, the master IGA will apply to all projects.
Okay.
So think of it as a hierarchy, right? You have the master IGA, and then you have a project charter, but you can also have element charter as well, like for safety projects or pavement rehabilitation. Those can be separate. And what it does is it allows the details of the project to be included in the project charter, not in the IGA.
Okay. So the master IGA itself doesn't have any financial information. It's just outlining that our responsibility is to deliver the RTA Next plan. Your responsibility is to fund it. And I'm just trying to understand what the details of that master IGA are going to look like.
Madam Chair, so Sam, we're still working some of those pieces out, but keep in mind, it's not a blank check, right? So what the master IGA may include are ballot amounts so that it's clear that it's referencing the approved ballot amounts. And that becomes kind of the overarching budget, if you will. So it's not just blank, but it isn't specific to that project, this budget in the IGA. That's in the project charter.
Okay. One other follow-up question on the project charter. Melanie, if you could go to that slide with the swim lanes. Okay, I'm just curious in this process, I see that there's the signed by the executive director portion. What happens if this project charter gets hung up right there and there's, do not pass go, do not collect $200? What is the escalation process if there's a bottleneck right there? No offense, Mike.
Madam Chair. Madam Chair, Sam had an amazing mentor to pick up things like that. So great job on your training, sir. Actually, I wrote that down and I wanted to address that. So that's a great, I'm appreciative you picked that up. What we will include in all of these is an escalation opportunity so that if you hit a roadblock, there's an escalation and it's clearly outlined as to what happens if there's a disagreement. And ultimately, keep in mind, the intent is to keep things moving. So they don't fester, they don't stop, but they somehow go up to whatever level, up to and including the board. It could be that a disagreement between a jurisdiction and the RTA staff may have to be escalated to the RTA board. So we're going to outline that. So that is still yet to be defined, but we'll include that either in the IGA or as a separate policy direction from the board.
We've got Paul and then John, but ladies and gentlemen, we're in a retreat format. So I appreciate that. I'll call on you, but there's no need, I think, at this point, while we're in a little bit more relaxed conversation, to bounce everything through the chair. But thank you, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is really, will these be blanket IGAs? So I think you answered that.
John?
Madam Chair, yeah, Mike, the pre-authorizations that were mentioned, you're not going to get hung up for 3 or 4 months at getting those moving though, right? Because I'm seeing the master IGAs getting done in the fall or something.
So, Madam Chair, we're going to go through anyway. You've trained us well, so we're afraid to do anything without your blessing. So, John, no, and that's exactly why we call those pre-authorizations. And I apologize. I thought I sent you all a note. Maybe I didn't. But the spirit and intent of the pre-authorization is to say, on La Villita, you want to start your RFP, you want to start getting your consultants on board, go for it. But we've also said, hey, you got to get your IGA done, before you can get reimbursed. So you can start your project. However, just know that I can't reimburse you until we get that IGA in place. So we can start working, and that was the spirit and intent of that. We did that with Oro Valley on Shannon Road, and that way they can get moving now as opposed to waiting. Now, I'm hopeful that we'll be able to get all of it done by September, so that in fact, when Shane's almost done with La Villita at that point, I can write him a big check.
Christina, just know, we know you're on with us, so we're trying to keep an eye out to make sure if you raise your hand at some point. So thank you.
Yeah, Melanie had offered to walk through an example
Yes,
of the
we're gonna-
chart. Okay,
Yeah, perfect. I just wanted to make sure there was no questions on that.
Mike, I just wanted to, I acknowledge the chair, but I'm just gonna, Mike. I would suggest that the escalation be part of the IGA and not part of the charter. It's just out there, it's more visible, and it just governs everything by way of it. And we talked a lot about that as a TMC as we were working through the process. So I appreciate that. Thanks.
Yep.
And again, this is wonderful work. Thank you for pulling this together, because I think this is the structure that we truly need to not get lost in the wilderness. I might make a suggestion on the swim lanes here. On the very top where you develop the project charter and you're developing the financial tables, that might be a little bit more of a two-way street, only because you're going to be working with your contractors, you're going to be establishing your burn rate as a jurisdiction. That might not be the same as what the financial expectation of the RTA. So back and forth. Okay.
Okay, so we'll pull up a couple of examples. And as we go through this process too, with the first couple of charters, there will be a lot of back and forth and there might be things that we need to adjust. So this is an example. This is La Vita Road. This is just the cover page, sort of outlining what the project is. A lot of the information coming straight from the ballot. Or I'm sorry, can you scroll down, Isa? We'll go to the second page. This first page will include the project description per the approved plan, and then the benefits and scope per the admin code. And then the project budget, that's what we're using as kind of the total maximum amount that will be allowed. Go ahead, go down. The performance matrix, this is an Excel file. I just pasted it in here so it would all be on one page, but this is an Excel file that Rick provided, and Shane, this is the information for La Vita Road that you provided. That will give us a lot of the information again for that baseline so we can report against it as part of the quarterly analysis. Go to the next page. And then the matching cash flow. So this is an example. This was provided by the town of Oro Valley for Shannon Road, but we like the template and it gave James all of the information he needed to create the financial table on our end. So this is what we would ask the jurisdiction to fill in, just providing that estimate of about how much you're going to be spending each year. Next page. And then that allows our staff to put together the financial table so we can match up RTA funding, non-RTA funding, and the project budget. James, anything else to add on this one?
Thanks, Melanie. So this is, it probably looks very familiar. It's a just a revised version of the financial exhibit that we've used over the last decade or so. This provides the option of fully funding the project, as you see in this example, or you can also, if the jurisdiction prefers, just provide an authorization by phase. So if that were to be a concern to a particular project, we could also accommodate that with this. Otherwise, it should be very familiar to everyone here. As I said, this is more or less what we've used for the last 10 or 15 years. So.
Madam Chair, let me add something. The cash flow component is extremely important for us to understand what the needs are region-wide. And so as you get an authorization for a project, we can then factor all of these pieces into our overall master cash flow. We're going to talk about cash flow here in a minute, just to show you kind of what the macro looks like. But the only way we can do that accurately is to make sure that we're getting that information from you as a part of this effort. So we're going to ask and push that you let us know what your expectation is in terms of needs as that project gets developed and those expenses come through. Thanks.
Okay, if you want to keep going, Isa. Just the same financial table. And then the last is roles and responsibilities. These are just made up at this point, but that's where we could put if there's RTAs doing advanced right-of-way acquisition, for example, those specific roles and responsibilities could be outlined here. And then we're anticipating these might be updated frequently. So the last part is just a document control table to track the different versions. We'll go through, we have a couple other examples we can go through this. Oh, go ahead.
On the doc control piece, if there are subsequent amendments, which I expect there will be, does it still go through the same process, signature by the executive director, signature by the appointee for the jurisdiction? It goes back to the same process.
Madam Chair, so Sam, yes. So keep in mind, one of the things that we talked about internally was in a perfect world, the jurisdiction will give you or some designated person authority to sign those. So it doesn't have to go back to them. But we're not opposed to that going back to them. I'm just suggesting, at least on the RTA side, it would not go back to the board unless there's some other issue. But the idea is for you to get authorization from your council to have the manager or whoever sign those so that as those project charter amendments are necessary, that you can sign them because they're consistent with the ballot, they're consistent with the IGA that's already been approved by them. That's the spirit and intent that we're trying to get to. Thank you, Sam.
Yeah, and any, oh, sorry.
Madam Chair, yeah, just question and observation. Maybe we're drawing down too much in the specifics, but I saw in this example that the ballot amount was more than the actual budget. So what's the responsibility or the condition of the remaining amount that the lead agency has control over, or how's that set up?
Madam Chair, there's a real simple answer. The answer is no. You don't get the additional money. That's right. Going back to the chair. So to be honest with you, that's a piece that we'll talk through down the road. If that happens, then we'll bring it back and we'll have a conversation because there's a policy implication there. But at this point, we just use it as an example. But if that were to happen, which would be a great thing in our world, then we'll have a conversation around what that looks like going forward.
And then on a multi-jurisdictional project where maybe one jurisdiction's ready and another jurisdiction might not be ready with regard to the collection of their contribution to the project, would there be a way to have maybe the RTA carry the one jurisdiction for a repayment at some later date, and that be kind of incorporated into this? Because I see, if we all have individual blanket IGAs, we're still not beholden to each other, and that's really kind of tied together on the project charter.
So there's a couple of pieces to that, Madam Chair. Paul, I think the first is we would expect there be a lead agency, so that lead agency would be the one that would be working through the details of the project. As far as the funding goes, should you find yourself in a position where a jurisdiction does not have the local match, that could be a problem. So we would have to escalate that. That would be a policy discussion with the board. I think there's ways to solve for that. But I can tell you that the ballot amounts are not just the TPT piece, but that's also the non-RTA funding as well. So pay attention to that other column, because when we went around and asked, okay, what's that contribution? That's now, pretty much cast in stone. So if there's a deviation from that, then that could be a challenge. If it's just a time thing, that's much simpler because that's just a cash flow thing. And I think as time goes on, we're going to hit all of those, right? All of those scenarios are going to surface. And so we can establish a process for escalation to the board to say, hey, this particular jurisdiction needs some help but they're good for it, right? And so we'll talk through what that looks like. I'm trying hard to keep the decision-making at a lower level, but on some of those things, we may have to escalate depending on the policy implication.
Excuse me, make sure I understand. On something like Silverbill, if we've got Marana and the city and the county, do you still envision one lead agency, or is that three separate?
So again, Madam Chair, I think it's going to be a function of the project. So Silverbell would make sense. There would be one lead agency. That would be our recommendation to you all to work out whoever is going to be the lead agency. I see Terry suggesting it's the county. However, for example, Drexel Road is another project that has multiple jurisdictions. Those segments may make sense to phase, and we've talked about that internally. But we've also seen that when you're phasing, there's challenges with the connection. So it's better to try to do all of it. So we're going to encourage all of it at once if we can, and then encouraging a single lead agency. And quite frankly, that could also be the RTA.
Yep. So we have a couple other examples we can walk through. Isa, if you want to skip the next one, we'll go to that one. Yes. So this is an example where we have multiple jurisdictions. So Colossal Cave was the example we put through here. And the Schedule A is very similar to the others. It has all of the information from the RTA plan. the benefits and scope from the administrative code. And then this is just one example of how it could be phased or segmented out. So you could elect to do segment 1, which could be I-10 to Marianne Cleveland. You would do a performance matrix for that segment, and the template would be the same. And then you would do a cash flow for that segment as well. These numbers are, we just use Shannon Road throughout, so don't pay attention to the numerical values here. And then this would allow James to create the funding schedule. And again, this could be for a particular segment, but still tracking against the entire element, or excuse me, the entire ballot amount for that project. Next page. And then here's where the roles and responsibilities could be divided. So we would have responsibilities for the lead agency, responsibilities for the partner agency, and then the responsibilities of the RTA. And then this document could be updated every time there is a new segment of the project.
Madam Chair, one of the things that we could consider is the project charter could be signed by multiple jurisdictions. And we could talk through that. I'm not sure. We hadn't thought about that, to be honest with you. We were really focused on a lead agency. But, you know, we could, if we get into a situation where it makes sense, we can certainly, I mean, this is up to us, right? I mean, we're building this ship as we're moving down the road. So that could work.
Yeah, Mike, have we even attempted to communicate with the jurisdictions about where they see their potential delaying actions, where the RTA might be able to say, well, I'll hire the consultant for you. I can do it quicker or something?
Madam Chair, so yes, but that's an ongoing discussion because I'm not sure everybody understands all of those pieces yet. And so as we get into the next topic, when I start talking about the role, I'll talk about what that looks like today. We have had at least some preliminary discussions about us taking on some projects already. So we're gearing ourselves up to be ready to do that. But I think it's going to evolve into a more serious conversation here with probably the next 6 months as people start to realize the capacity that you have internally as jurisdictions and what that, we'll call it supplement, is going to be needed from the RTA.
You mentioned that on the charters, you may have, with a multi-jurisdictional, you may want to have all the jurisdictions sign. I think that's really important. You've got responsibilities with partner agency spelled out in here. I think their signature needs to go on there that addresses that we have the ability to commit to that. We have time frame, and so I would encourage that.
Just speaking as past experience from the first RTA, we had a multiple jurisdiction street where, you know, Oro Valley was at the tail end of this, and our last section had, not due to any other reasons, but less money than originally anticipated. So I think in these charters, you would need to set up so that there is some type of an accountability for each and every jurisdiction in every amount of contribution that, or if it runs over, who's paying for that run, for how it runs over. Because otherwise I could see too much finger pointing towards the end of these projects.
Madam Chair, great point there, Paul. I think that as this evolves, the structure of the charter, which is really what folks are going to be committing to in terms of the project budgets, project scopes. I think that's where that conversation is going to happen early on. As far as a phase or phases, I think it's all a function of the individuals adding up to the total, right? And making sure that we're holding ourselves accountable all the way through the process so that the first segment doesn't soak up all the cash, if you will. And that's a reasonable concern. I think that the charter, the way we've structured it, will address that with holding hard to the budgets that are established.
No, that's okay. We'll share. Just from a procedural standpoint, this is a draft of the template. What are the next steps? And I know during the administrative code, we had a subcommittee and that committee went over drafts and provided input and the staff was great in incorporating that and returning it back. So I'm just interested in how we move this to finalizing the template.
Can you put that slide back up where we had it's the slide that had the flow chart? One, but that one, yep. So our intent is to bring this to you. The IGA language is pretty standard, and that's going to be, I don't know that we need to, I mean, I'm happy to take it to whatever committees you all think, but you're it at this point, this group, then we'll take it to the board. Keeping in mind that the IGA, although we're going to try to make them very standard, there might be some nuances to each of the jurisdictions. The project charter, if you want us to further vet that, happy to do it. I think what you see here is the bottom line as to what's going to be included. Now, keep in mind that as each charter is established and initiated, that it will be different, and it will be in some instances radically different when it's a pavement rehabilitation charter versus a project charter versus even a potentially a transit charter. So I'm a little nervous about trying to make it, hey, let's try to do all of them and figure out all of the situations or all of the cases, because they're going to be pretty different, is my gut. So at this point, we are not planning to vet it anywhere else. We're basically vetting it to you. If you'd like to have more work sessions on it and get into some of the detail, happy to do that. We can call some additional meetings. We can do the policy the policy subcommittee or subgroup of the TMC. Happy to do that if you think that would bring value.
Just the experience with the subcommittee was very effective, and we had a lot of great input. We were able to then the representatives on the subcommittee were able to circulate with our internal teams and then come back and bring specific input back. So I think it would be helpful. I don't want to commit this group to having to go through the details on it, but I think some further vetting, both of the template on the charter and the framework of the IGA might be helpful so that we don't miss something early on in the process.
Madam Chair, I'm happy to pull that group together if you all are up for it. What I would suggest is check your calendars for next week, because I'd really like to get this in front of the board. I want to make sure that we're moving this thing forward, but understand we're not trying to pull wool over your eyes. We're just saying, hey, we got to keep moving. And if you all can commit that kind of time to it, man, we're golden. We'll get that. So I'm happy to do it. We will convene a subcommittee meeting post haste, and we'll get it going. Happy to do it. You're welcome. Madam Chair, what we'll probably do then, just keep in mind, we'll convene the group, probably look for another TMC full committee meeting shortly thereafter, so that the full committee can give a recommendation to the board, and hopefully before the 4th, which is right around the corner. Okay, all right, thanks.
I did have one other example for a categorical element, if you want to view that, or do you want to keep moving? View it? Okay. So we put an example together for the safety, ADA, and active transportation element. The cover page, again, is the same. And we just, again, these are all examples that we picked. So we made up that the town of Marana would like to do some traffic signal upgrades. And so the RTA element budget, this amount is the amount that is allocated to the town of Marana for this element per Appendix A in the administrative code. So that amount is right up front along with the benefits. And then the scope could be, for that particular project within this element, here's what you're going to be doing. You would fill out the same performance matrix and the cash flow. And then as an example, that 10.4 million is the total amount. This might only take up 2 million of it. And so then you would just update your charter again that we're tracking against that $10.4 million total. And you would just update it with new numbers for every project. And James would create the same funding table. And then the roles and responsibilities as well. You might not have a partner agency on this one, but I'll take that out. Thank you.
Mike, any special arrangement with ADOT in getting this sorted out? IGA's charters, how you can,
Madam Chair, that's going to be a conversation here in a second. So we're treating ADOT a little differently, the ADOT projects, the 5 interchanges and any other projects we might have. We're going to talk about the RAC here in a second. And I think it'll help answer some of that. But ADOT is a little bit of a different approach. They have their own project managers, they have their own processes, but you'll see how we approach this. So Madam Chair, is that all, Melanie? Is that all you got? Okay, thank you. I wish I could take credit for this. I can't. I got a great team, and Melanie and come up, Rick and team have really done. I think it's the framework is good. We'll work out the detail. And I'll be honest. I'll take the hit for the speed with which this is getting done. If we need to delay it a little bit, we can to make sure everybody's comfortable with it. I should have thought about that, and I apologize. I didn't. So. You weren't first and foremost in my mind, Terry. I apologize for that. But that's going to change. So let's switch gears a little bit now to the role, and I want to get a little broader than just the role. I want to talk about cash flow. I want to talk about the cash and what we're looking at and what we're seeing. So that you know how we're approaching this and what we're thinking at this point. And so James Tao's gonna hand out a sheet here. By the way, what we handed out earlier, we probably should have waited because everybody's been looking at it. That's the RAC funding, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. But in essence, the bottom line here is, if we are wildly successful, I mean, if we just, we're firing on all cylinders and we get everything moving and out the door, we're going to run out of cash in about 4 years. We're going to need to bond. Okay. But as I mentioned in my memorandum to the board, that bonding conversation is a policy. Go ahead and take it. I don't know. He must not like you guys. But that conversation is a policy discussion, right? Because you don't, it's not an automatic. Hey, James, we're gonna need more. We're gonna need more. We ran out. Well, we'll get some more though. Let's get some more there. But again, the bonding conversation is a policy discussion, right? My job is to push this thing hard, and I'm pushing hard to get this thing out the door. And then we'll have a conversation down the road. Now, very simplistically, what you all are going to look at is the red on the bottom of that. That basically shows that we'll be out of cash at the end of 30, okay? Which means in 31, we're probably going to have to be bonding. Now, the policy decision at that point is, does that make sense? It doesn't mean we have to, but if we want to continue at the same pace, we're going to need to. But that's a policy discussion with the board probably in the 29 year, because then we'll know if we're in fact needing it.
Well, Mike, is it really, I mean, you said we don't have to, but if we're going to keep the pace up, if we don't keep the pace up that you set the foundation for us here today, then we're.
That's right. However, however, you got to keep your options open, because the market may not be good for bonding at that point. So we got to make sure that we leave all the options out there. This is a plan. In a perfect world, at the end of 30, we're bonding, and we'll bond 3 times in this program.
Well, it begs the question then, Mike, if we don't bond, then how do we keep pace?
We don't.
But
It's the timing. That's all it is.
Right.
Now, so keep in mind, again, it doesn't mean that work stops.
Right.
It just means that we scale back, and it becomes pay as you go all the way.
Yeah.
Right. and we only gave you the first 10 years-ish of the program. As we start looking at the outer years, we're in a surplus situation because there's so much early, we'll call it early expense because of the RTA 1 projects. Remember, a lot of this is driven by completion of the RTA 1 projects in period 1. Now, we could just say, hey, no problem, we'll meter those out. But I said, no, I think I got beat up enough when we were out talking about RTA Next that people were really frustrated about projects not getting finished, right? And so what I've suggested is we need to finish RTA 1 projects in period 1, not start them in period 1. So what that does is it front loads a bunch of cash there, right? Now, I will also tell you that it's highly likely that we would need to bond, but it assumes exact performance that's on that piece of paper, which means that everybody's firing on all cylinders. So with that, go ahead.
Does this assume that the local contribution would come in at the very beginning? I mean, could that help offset the bonding?
Madam Chair, Paul, not necessarily. So part of what our aggressive stance is, it could be that part of the bonding is for the local match. It could be. There could be a conversation around that or how we do that. Okay. This is only TPT. So this is just the sales tax, basically. And so again, it's paying attention annually. So when we have these discussions and you hear the quarterly analysis, we're projecting out, hey, remember that spreadsheet we gave you back in May of 26? It now looks like we're going to be at the end of 30 when we're going to need it for sure. Or it's going to be in 31 when we're going to need it for sure. And we give you that update every quarter, if you will, or quarter-ish, we'll say, so that you know, and the board knows particularly, hey, let's pay attention. If we want to continue, back to Shane's point, if we want to continue to produce and actually get things done, we're going to need to be potentially bond there. The other consideration there is if we do bond and we're able to move projects from the outer years into the earlier part of it, there's an inflation piece there too. And so the value of bonding, obviously then, that's a calculation that we can make at that time. So I want to turn it over to James to go over, go ahead.
One quick question relative to the bonding. I understand that the bond market may not be great and we may want to pay as you own, pay as we go and not pay interest on it, that sort of thing. But if we don't bond, it seems like you were saying they were paying 600,000, no, 800,000 a day. It seems like if we don't bond for a period of 5 or 10 years, we're never going to be able to do the 800,000. It's going to be $1 million a day. It's going to be $2 million a day, in which case we'll find ourselves like we were last time. So I'm just saying that I realize that bonding may not be the most desirable at any point in time, but we may feel like that the only way we're going to give the voters what they asked for is to go that route.
Madam Chair, so not exactly. No. I've been accused of an engineer trying to be an accountant, so I'm not an accountant. But keep this in mind, right? What I gave you, that 800,000, that's linear. That assumes the static amount of expense the entire year. If you actually look at the program or what we're projecting for period 1, it's significantly more than that. And so what that does is it front loads cash to get those projects out the door and build that momentum. And quite frankly, the momentum piece is what we're talking about here. So if we can get all of these systems in place, the charters and all these things that we're talking about, so that we're moving and we're firing on all cylinders, I'm going to tell you, normally red on a piece of paper is not a good thing. That's a great problem to have. If we are to the point where we're firing on all cylinders and we are showing that we're going to need to bond, it's a wonderful problem because that tells us that we have performed it the way we've projected, which is to get this stuff done even earlier than what we were originally thinking.
Mr. Ortega, there's going to be a service fee for this bonding. Does this stay within the rails of what was on the ballot?
Great question. So maybe. So think through it this way. As I mentioned, when you bond, obviously you all know this, you're bringing in future costs to today with the expectation that you're hedging inflation. The cost of that is about $110 million. What's on this piece of paper, I don't have it, but this piece of paper, it's $110 million. So the conversation in probably 29 or even during the 30-year is, okay, let's look at inflation through the end of the program. And is that $110 million cost worth it for us to bring those projects up? Okay, so I hesitate to say yes, but the answer is not no either. There is a cost, but it may be that that cost is less than the inflation, hedging off that inflation in the future.
Fair enough.
Thanks. I'm going to turn it over to James. I know I'd like you to go over it because I think you put a lot of work into this, and I appreciate you doing that. Thanks.
Well, thanks, Mike, and you covered everything very nicely. I'll go through my points just in case there's something to add. So the first period of this cash flow shows significant activity due to the remaining RTA 1 projects and sub-element 1A, what we previously referred to as the deferred projects, slated for completion over the first 5 years of the new RTA. With an RTA 1 projected fund balance of about $418 million, we have sufficient resources to complete RTA 1 projects based on our most recent project cost information within that first period, as you can see here. We're also prioritizing sub-element 1A, the previously deferred projects, for completion in the first period as well. So with the fund balance, with our new excise tax revenues, we have sufficient resources based on our cost estimates that we have currently to complete 1B or 1A and RTA 1 remaining projects in that first 5 years, at least from a financial perspective. If we move to 1B, RTA 2 projects and the other elements included, which includes transit, that requires an additional $500 million in resources. That's also, again, based on preliminary programming and input from jurisdictional partners. So as Mike mentioned, in late year 4, we would need to find a new funding source if we performed at this pace. So a bond issuance at that time, over a 9-year period, I believe, or wait, 8-year period. So we would issue bonds 3 times to limit the interest on those issuances for a total of about $275 million. And after 2037, so that's why I didn't show after 2037, because at that point, our revenues exceed our expenditures for the remainder of the program. So that sums it up, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Seems like we've dazzled them with numbers, so we appreciate that. But I think the reason for this conversation is to let you know we are thinking about that. We understand and recognize. Now, one thing that Jamie, where's Jamie? He was here a minute. Oh, there he is. One thing that Jamie mentioned, who is our tip guru, right, said in the tip, what we'll do is we're building the improvement program. We're going to plug in bonding. We're going to say, because otherwise we're not balanced, right? So in those outer years, we're going to say we're bonding. And that shows a revenue source. Now, again, policy decision, whether we do or not, we can have those discussions, but I want you to know that it's not lost on us and that we will plug a number there, whatever that number is that we might need to bond to show that it's balanced. Okay.
Madam Chair. Just, does the cash flow assume then the projects are delivered in the phase that they're planned for in the ballot item? And if things move around, how do we account for that?
So I'm going to answer that because it actually accelerates most of them. So the idea and the spirit and intent is to compress as much as we can. And the beauty of doing that is if you're delayed a little bit, which will never happen here, but if we're delayed a little bit, that we're still going to be within the periods. We're going to be on time. Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I'd like to do now is call on Adam to go over the RAC funding, which is that big spreadsheet that you were given earlier. Before he does, I want to make a couple of comments on that because I think it's important. So this goes back to the ADOT piece that you all were asking about. So when RTA Next was approved, when the ballot was approved, there were 5 projects that were included that, if you remember, when we had kind of some of the last iterations of the plan, really showed a very significant number, a significant amount of RAC funding towards those projects, and we reduced the TPT allocation. So what concerned me was that although, Jeremy was sitting at the end and he couldn't be here today, so I'll speak for him, put on my old state engineer hat on. But if you remember, he was very nervous about that because, and he voiced it to us as a group that, hey, we're really shifting a bunch of cost over to the state, and that's great, but we're not prepared for that right this minute. So what we suggested is that let us take a stab working with our partners at ADOT at a 20-year look. So ADOT's not conditioned to do that. Normally they think in 5-year increments, right? And so we have to be thinking 20 years because we have all of the program. And I want to make sure that we have confidence in our ability to deliver our part, but a big chunk of that is the ADOT funding. So what we did is we sat down with ADOT and we just started looking at the program as a whole. So we asked them for their priorities. We put the RTA Next priorities on there, which are the 5 interchanges, and we came up with some scenarios based on some assumptions of the RAC funding going forward. Kind of a simple exercise in terms of developing a budget, if you will. Now, I will tell you, and I've heard from a couple of you concerns about the movement. There were some things that were in the tip that got moved, and it looks like we moved some of potentially your projects in exchange for some of other projects. That was not the spirit and intent of that. Okay, I didn't realize at the time that there were some constituency groups that were looking very closely at the tip in terms of some of the expectations there. So we're gonna go back and work with our partners again to say, okay, we're not trying to hurt anybody. We're just trying to get all of it done in a way that we can demonstrate using the RAC funding that, hey, these projects are going to get delivered per the RTA. Now, I will tell you, and I saw Shane taking pictures, which made me very, very nervous of the spreadsheet, but we are trying to move those projects forward. We are trying to move them up so that our projects the RTA projects are happening sooner than what we had anticipated. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, it's consistent with what I've been talking about in terms of delivery of the program. But the second part of it is I want to make sure that we have, those are very, very complex projects. Some of them, Cortero Road, for example, extremely complex project. I want to make sure that we have adequate time to get those developed and we get those things built. So I just wanted to kind of preface that. Sam, I know that the city had expressed some concern about that. I want to reassure you that we heard you. We're going to go back. I know that maybe the county had some concerns as well. Heard you. We're going to go back and look at this. Again, the spirit and intent here is pure. It's really trying to establish what the region's delivery looks like with regard to the RAC funding. So with that, I'll turn it over to Adam to get to it.
All right, thanks, Mike. For fear of repeating what Mike just said in my preamble, I'm just gonna plow forward here. And Issa, if we could pop that up on the screen when you're ready. So as we do look to transition to a new fiscal year and a new ADOT 5-year program, there were a host of factors that made this not just an atypical year, but an unprecedented one. The approval of RTA Next introduces deadlines in the form of period compliance for those 5 TIs. The RAC funding allocations will see a dramatic decrease starting in fiscal 2030. ADOT has revised their delivery methodology to combat rising construction costs, and an aging DCR for the I-10 corridor shows a system built for traffic patterns that have not necessarily proven out since its publication. With that in mind, we asked ADOT to partner with PAG RTA in the development of a 20-year RAC planning worksheet For all the reasons I mentioned just now, the necessary planning horizon extends further than our TIP is capable of, and we collectively need to be thinking about how we leverage those federal dollars for the greatest impact now more than ever. The first steps towards creating a living document, one designed to facilitate discussion and identify challenges and pain points in the system, needed to be developed for introduction to PAG RTA committees without delay, and that's what you're seeing here today. My goal is to show you the process that we used and to share the criteria we considered for building this version. And that's a huge caveat. As Mike mentioned, I'd like to emphasize that this version, because this is an iterative process that will rely on jurisdictional input before anything becomes actionable. I'd ask that you consider this a proof of concept as I go through it today. I am aware that there is discussion to be had on the order in which projects appear on this version, especially in 2030 and out. I'll start with the assumptions and the logic flow of this particular scenario, again, as an early demonstration of how this has come together. For RAC allocations, we use the 118 million that was forecast for 2031 as the starting point, and we assumed a straight line 3% annual increase in fund availability. This will be revisited every year as those new estimates come out. For project costs, we used RMAP values plus 10%, or in some cases where they were available, the values from ADOT's 2023 Monte Carlo simulations, as opposed to the project costs that were found in the I-10 DCR or an I-19 corridor profile study. Per direction from Mike, like you just heard, we compress the timelines for all of the RTA TIs as much as possible with a minimum expectation that the construction phase would start in the second to last year of the period. I've been working very closely with Jeremy Moore from ADOT, and through him, we understand that ADOT has identified that their preferred methodology for delivery along this interstate corridor is to continue using this newer method of combining two TIs with the shared widening rather than only addressing individual TIs or one TI and some associated widening. There are cost savings associated with this preference, along with logistical benefits. The Keno and Country Club TIs project is a great example of the logistical advantage, as they are about 6 months ahead of schedule, as I understand it. With that reasoning, they would also like to combine and incorporate the Valencia TI to the existing I-10 Alvarado to Valencia. That's what it's called in the DCR. In our TIP, it's the Baraza Aviation Parkway project. However, this would consume most of the RAC funding available from fiscal 27 through 30. But as I understand it from Jeremy, this move would ultimately save around $40 million in 2026 dollars versus leaving the Valencia TI and the associated widening until later, where it's slotted currently in that DCR. ADOT would also like to explore or outright combine the Park TI 6 TI and that associated widening for the same reasons, but that would increase that total project cost versus just the ramps that are on the TIs that are projected or planned right now. As we look at the first 3 years of this worksheet, if we take everything that I said together, the increased costs of the I-10 Alvarado to Valencia that now would include the Valencia TI, plus the remaining amount programmed on Country Club Keno TIs, and finally, the initiation of the Moore Road TI to satisfy enough time to deliver in the first period, that consumes the entirety of the available RAC funding in that 3-year time frame. So up until this point, all of those assumptions and rationales that I've given you, most of what I mentioned has been fairly consistent across any early builds or versions of this. The next few assumptions introduce a good bit more variability, meaning that the 3 projects I'm going to mention all have trade-offs to their positioning, and I think that's what Mike was specifically alluding to in the conversations with the city. Portero TI. So with that railroad crossing elimination grant and the associated state match, we have roughly 30.4 million of funding available to obligate for design starting in fiscal 27. This version advances the Cortero TI in an attempt to ensure that that 30.4 million of investment is not wasted or the design ages out as time goes by or at risk of a federal reimbursement due to lack of obligation. The Park and 6 TIs were examined during the Country Club and Keno design phase by the consultants and could potentially maintain acceptable operations if deferred. I really am just kind of parroting what Jeremy's told me on this, so don't shoot the messenger here. I-19 Phase 3 widening would also be deferred by 1 year, but not deferred to later than the Park and 6 TIs, with the reasoning there that a greater impact could be achieved on alleviating traffic at that system interchange and beyond, rather than the ramp improvements on the Park and 6 TIs in the same time frame. So again, those are just assumptions for this specific model. As we move past the first 10 years or so in this version, and the very bottom line, you can just see the remaining amount, and there's just some color shaded cells. The amount of green that you see there just represents more available funding that's unprogrammed. This was left a little bit looser, so there's some pockets of funding availability that could be used to address unforeseen cost increases. We've also looked at much more condensed, much more aggressive scenarios that only leave a few pennies available in each of those years. At the end of the day, this is a planning tool, so we have a lot of options at our disposal. We can find and right size that level of aggression or aggressive programming, as well as we can address any of the project ordering that we have. So thanks, everybody. That's kind of how we built this. I'm happy to answer any questions about the structure of it or any other questions that you might have.
Madam Chair, before we open it up to the floor for questions, the piece that's important here, just keep in mind that when the ADOT tip was developed, last year, whenever it was that they go through the iterations, RTA Next was not a factor for them. And so we've now just had to infuse that into that tip. And so that's really what you're seeing. Now, I will tell you that, I get paid to be aggressive. And so I've said, hey, we're gonna push hard to move those things and compress our timeframes as we've been talking about. So just understand that it wasn't anything more than that. We will work with you all to see what makes sense. And I'll use the term politically for you as well, because I know, as I mentioned, there are some constituency groups that are jumping up and down out there, and that's fine. We'll address that. So, Madam Chair, happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Mike. So Cortero is a period 3 project in the RTA Next plan, and I see we've got it in this, how we've laid it out here, moving all the way up into starting in period 1, delivery in period 2. Are there operational issues beyond the complexity of the TI that's causing the movement of that?
Quite frankly, Sam, Madam Chair, quite frankly, it's the complexity that's got me nervous. We could move it to period 2 or 3, but the complexity of that has got me nervous. I think that's going to be one of our more complex projects. That's not just the businesses there, but also the railroad. And I think the delays there are going to be significant because of those two pieces. So it's simply that it's already an operational nightmare. It's already an operational challenge, but it is really the complexity of the delivery that's got me nervous, to be honest with you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I think, as you can see, this is an evolution. Please erase any photos that you may have taken, for the, oh, God. They're in the press already. Well, I did understand that there was one of the electeds that had seen this and was excited and actually talked about that publicly. So, we'll just, it's fine. But just recognize it's an iteration. We're going to keep working through. But what the message here is, it's the broadness of view. It's really looking at this for the entire 20 years with all of our partners to deliver and what that looks like. And I think it really speaks to how we can work with everyone to ultimately deliver that RTA Next plan. Okay, if there's no other questions, moving on to, or staying with that role, some of you had asked about have we been asked by jurisdictions to help? The short answer is yes, and the help is going to vary. I think that we will take on whatever role you all believe that is necessary to deliver the program. And so where I'm going to need your help as jurisdictions is tell me what your capacity is to deliver these schedules. And when you might struggle, let's have that discussion up front as opposed to when you're struggling. But recognizing that we are being very aggressive with our delivery schedule, we're probably going to have to stub our toe a couple of times before we get to the point where it's like we're firing on all cylinders. But we have authority to basically deliver the entirety of a project with the exception of condemnation. It's the only thing we can't do. Everything else we can do. So our partnership with you will be key there as we go out and start going down that path. Oh, yeah. No, that's fine.
How do you want that feedback and what time, what's the timing that you want that feedback? I know, I mean, I appreciate the lesson you had the other day and you would ask that question. I've asked staff and I have a response. You just want that email, you want the general talk? How do you want that?
So I think, you know, and we're having some conversations with Sam and his team. The sooner the better. And there's two parts to it. One is you're going to say, we need help with project XYZ. And then we're going to say, awesome, here's a list of what I need from you. And so that conversation needs to happen now, even if that project's a year or two down the road. Because what I'm having to do is, or we are having to do, is organize ourselves around that. And the way I presented it to the staff for us internally, there's two components. There's the program management, right? Which is all the elements, making sure the budget, all that quarterly analysis, that's this program management. But then we're going to have project management responsibilities as well. And those are different skill sets. And I'm trying to figure out what the magnitude of, I know what the magnitude is of this. I don't have a sense for what the magnitude is of the project level delivery.
So perhaps it could be in response to provide the pre-authorization for a project.
Yes, or sooner. Yeah, or sooner. Yeah, yeah. As soon as you know and you're comfortable saying, even if you're just thinking it, let me know so I can start organizing ourselves around, hey, what is it going to take for me to help you all deliver? Okay.
Excuse me, Mike. So
Oh, Jason, sorry.
you're saying that we reach out to you. Do we call you directly or
No,
who on your staff?
You means RTA, not me.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, just reach out to the staff. I mean, I know that you all have been talking to Rick and
Yeah.
and by the way, we're ready to help you all as well. So just let us know and please don't feel like you have to go through me. That's not the intent. And get all these emails. I'm like,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I can see,
Okay.
I already see them popping up. It's amazing. But no, just make sure one of the staff members is well-versed. And then we communicate very regularly and we have very regular team meetings on, okay, how are we going to do all this stuff? So, okay.
Okay. Just one more question.
Oh,
As far as the project charter, you mentioned that there was a performance matrix and financial tables. Will the sample charter include those documents as well? Because I'm ready to move forward on Community West Day.
Yes, so we have some Excel, templates that we can give you, and then we can take that information and give it to James to build the financial schedule. So it'll go back and forth in the beginning, so we can work with you.
Madam Chair, Jason, that's a great question because I want to bring your attention to that part of the charter because that charter component will actually be dovetailed into the overall reporting matrix that everybody's going to see quarterly. So take your time on that, make sure that that is as accurate as possible because that's going to be the performance that we're going to be looking at across the board. Okay. I wanted to mention one other piece in project, we'll call it project delivery on a macro scale. So we encourage you to look for project efficiencies. And if you have a pavement rehab project and you're going to do a bike lane or something, great. Those are all wonderful. But keep in mind that if you choose to use RTA funding for a project, for example, a paving project, and use the pavement rehabilitation component, that element, that project now becomes an RTA project, which will be showing up here. Okay, so if you're looking at, for example, if you've got some, you want to build a bike lane, you want to add a bike lane to a road that you've already got on schedule to be reconstructed, but you want to expand it and add a bike lane, and you want to use some safety ADA and active transportation money for that. Great. Except now that whole project is going to be showing up as a metric for us because the delivery of that component is intertwined with the overall project. So I just caution you on that because I don't want you to think that, now, hey, no problem, we're going to focus on this piece. Well, no, it's got to be functional. So just keep that in the back of your mind as you're mixing funding to get projects done, that they'll show up here because I've got to be able to track that and be able to report the progress on those projects. Okay, just keep that in mind. That's all. Let's go ahead and move on, Madam Chair, if you're okay with it. The pieces that'll be important here, well, there's a lot of pieces, but the things that we're going to want you to be looking at is if you see that on the advanced delivery teams as an example, we have put a lot of energy and effort into that. We're pushing that concept out to try to identify problems or issues, challenges within the corridors mostly. As you see that, it's going to be important that you keep that information in a way that is used by your agency or your jurisdiction. The spirit and intent here is not for me to go and hire an advanced delivery team and then for you all to start your project later and then reinvent the wheel. The intent, the spirit and intent is to build on whatever we identify or we find during that initial phase so that it saves us all in the long term, okay? Because otherwise that'll be a budget challenge for us. And I caution you on that because that could easily happen. And so as you're building your RFPs for future, it's going to need to be built on as a foundation of that or from a foundation of that advanced delivery team. And it sounds like a no-brainer, but you know, I just wanted to put that in your head there. So then I'd like to move to committee restructuring, unless you want to take a break. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Mike. On the advanced delivery team, so a few questions. Will the firms that are selected for that, will they be ineligible to compete for the design for those projects they work on? So for example, you know what I'm saying? Like, will
Yes.
they, okay.
So, Madam Chair, so we have gotten a read from our folks that from our attorneys say, yes, they can. Okay, that they will be able to, they're eligible to do that because they're two different pieces, right? However, you'll need to check with your internal jurisdictional folks to make sure that your folks are okay with that. I would encourage that it would be, and our read is that they are, but you've obviously got to feel comfortable.
Sure.
I will tell you, if you come back and say, no, our folks are saying can't do it, that's going to be a challenge for us. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But at this point, we're recommending and suggesting that it is okay because they're two different scopes. Okay.
Speaking of scope, what do you expect the deliverable will be from these advanced delivery teams? Is there a report? Is there something that we'll be able to use to build upon when we get into final design?
Madam Chair, we're going to get into detail on that here in a minute with Rick, but the bottom line is think of it as a preliminary view or review of that corridor project. It could be up to preliminary design in order to identify some of the challenges. And what we're really focused on is the challenges that we know of that are going to be coming forward. Right-of-way acquisition, either number or complexity, you know, cultural, utilities. Is there a big substation there? Is there a lift station there that's going to cause a significant challenge for us? If we can, railroad, if we can identify those up front and do a little legwork to say, hey, you need to pay attention. Here's a substation that's going to need to be relocated and there's no way to miss it based on some preliminary alignments that we've run.
Okay.
It's truly an opportunity for that team to look at the corridor and identify whatever the challenges are. That will then translate into, I hate to use the word report, but will translate into a document, information that will then be the basis for us to say to you, hey, here you go, Sam, you've got a challenge on, you know, XYZ road, and here are some things that we're identifying. How can we help you with that? That's the spirit.
Okay, that's helpful. And I'll hold this, I want to talk about railroad coordination at some point. I don't know if now is the right
What?
time.
The what?
Railroad coordination. So in this conversation, when you feel like that's the right time, let me know, Mike, because I'd like to
I
talk.
think we should talk, yeah.
Now?
Absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry, yeah, Madam Chair, just to piggyback off what Sam said, this might be a good role for the RTA to be meeting with the major utility providers. Because instead of just being case by case, there are various jurisdictions that are going to be dealing with the utility providers. And they have to be on board from their standpoint of any augmentation of the programming and scheduling to get things through the system so it doesn't get bogged down. RTA may have a stronger role.
So Madam Chair, just to let you know, we did have a meeting with the utilities late last year. I don't know, it's kind of a blur now. And they committed, we met with their top brass in this room, and they committed to assisting us with the delivery of RTA. And so at least from that level, they have committed. And what we've committed to is working with them to not only identify these major issues, but also help them streamline some of the challenges that they have with jurisdictional approvals or even funding, those kinds of things. So there have been challenges on all sides when it comes to utilities. I was very, very optimistic leaving that meeting that they are on board. They understand. It's all of us working together. I've committed to getting back to them and talking through some of the detail now, but we are all over that because that is a pretty significant challenge.
Yeah, thanks. So, as I look at our projects, not only in the 2006 plan that we have to complete, but then the RTA Next projects like Cortero, the railroad keeps popping up. And, I think all the way looking out to period 4 where we've got Colossal Cave, like I think if we don't start on that project now, we're probably not going to deliver it in period 4. And so I feel like it's a challenge we all are facing. And I'm just wondering if we could develop some strategies on how we can band together and go, after the railroad to be a better partner. Otherwise, we just keep banging our head against the wall on these projects. And the one that's going to affect the city most immediately is 22nd Street from Keno to I-10. That has grade separation. It's supposed to be delivered in period 1, and I'm very nervous about that because we've not even started final design yet.
Madam Chair, so we did have one of our team members, Jeanette, put us in contact with some folks that do utility or railroad coordination. And they've given us some tips on how to deal or how to work with the railroad. One of the tips is to be all-inclusive, so all the projects together, and bring it so that we're talking about Colossal Cave, potentially Saurita, potentially Cortero. There's more than just a few. I mean, there's a lot. And so if we can have all of that conversation at one time, it resonates better with them. But the other piece to it, Sam, that I've thought about, and I think I may have mentioned this at a previous meeting, how powerful would it be if we do hit a snag on Colossal Cave or on Cortero or wherever for the RTA board, which is really the region's mayors, to send a letter to, and go down that path, right? That's a lot different than, no offense, Sam, but Sam Credio sending a letter as the transportation director to express frustration. I think it's that escalation that can really help, in my opinion. But we've got to have our ducks in a row too. We've got to make sure that we're ready to go and that we have concepts and that we have something for them to react to. And then we start pushing that even politically if we need to, through our senators or even the White House. Okay.
I'd like to echo that even through the utilities. Just getting them to go when they need to go and using more of the weight of the RTA than individual jurisdiction.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Can I add something on that? Mike, I just want to echo to what Paul said there is, we've been talking about ways that we can indemnify the utilities earlier in the design process so they feel comfortable moving forward with their relocations. Well, we did that on 22nd Street East, and there was still a 4 to 6 month lag before the utilities would start. So it feels like we're trying to do the right things, and yet we're still not getting a proper response. And the reaction I've got from our team is that it's just not a priority for them. They've got other things going on, or it's kind of like the boy who cried wolf. We're like, hey, you guys, we're coming, and they're like, sure you are. We've seen this before. So, there might be a little bit of blame on each party there, but the more we can work together and try to find a place that they realize we're serious about this, but we can also give them the tools they need. I think we're willing to do that, but they've got to come to the table with all of us.
Madam Chair, Sam, I'm gonna just echo that, because when we met with them, I started off the meeting basically saying, look, we recognize that your functions are to provide power, provide natural gas, provide, fiber. And this, when we come to you and ask you to relocate a facility, that's not your priority, right? Your priority is keeping the lights on and all things go along with that. But the way I approached it is I suggested to them the RTA, the magnitude of the RTA and the impact it has to all of your users as utilities is huge. And so let's talk about that and how we can streamline our internal stuff that needs to happen so that they can move and they did say that about the crying wolf, right? And so we have to do our job as well to make sure that when we say, we need you out of there by next week, we need them out of there by next week, and we have all the right of way, and we have all the pieces put together.
So let me just say, I think we've heard a lot of echoing here with regard to utilities and the railroad. And at the risk of beating a dead horse here, I will say that the town of Marana has experienced this extensively over the last 5 years relative to the railroad. We're still working on that with Tangerine, the widening there, widening the interchange, widening the roadway. Well over 2 years ago, we began talking with the railroad about the need to add additional lanes going across the railroad. They wouldn't even look at at doing any design or anything until all of the design and the work was done on Tangerine. So I think, to Sam's point, to Paul's point, to your point, the earlier we start in the process on anything that involves the railroad or utilities, the better. And I don't think we can start soon enough. We highly, highly underestimated how much time it was going to take to get through with the railroad. Utilities too, on Tangerine, that was delayed almost 5 months. We were ready to move, and we had to wait 5 months before they were ready to move the lines because it was coming into monsoon, and they wanted to take a chance on moving them during monsoon. So we wanted to wait until November. So again, I think the earlier, the better.
Just to close out the conversation on the railroad coordination, on the advanced delivery team, Mike, is there an opportunity to create like a strike team with Union Pacific coordination where?
Now we're talking strike team.
Yeah. Where they're they have railroad specialists, a lot of folks have left UP and they've gone to the private side, and maybe we can get some of those folks to go to Omaha or speak their language, because that's where we've seen the most success, if you have somebody that can speak the railroad language. And I'm just curious if, as part of this, there's an opportunity to create that for the region.
You are my peeps. I like that strike team, right? So I don't mind telling you that I was sort of half kidding, but I basically suggest to the utilities, we'll get your attention when I clip your lines and we build our road. It's just kind of that simple, because we have to move on this. But the short answer to that is yes. And so what I'd like to do is turn it over to Rick, talk a little bit more about the advanced delivery team. I moved to the role because it all kind of goes together, so I kind of skipped it, but I want to go back because I think Rick's done a lot of great work on this, and I think it'll answer a lot of your questions on that. Sam, go ahead, Rick.
Do I still have control, Lisa? No?
No, I'm asking you guys. This to you. Okay.
Just a quick check. Anybody want to take a break, or we okay? Just moving forward.
Cool.
Let's go.
Cool.
Thanks, Rick.
You can go ahead and advance it, Issa, to the advanced delivery team. There's just a couple slides I put together. And next one, please. You heard a lot more discussion about this, and obviously the value and intent of this. And as you heard, we kind of put together a couple slides to summarize all what you've heard about. One of the key things that kind of dawned on me is this is not brand new. It's something we've done occasionally on projects. So we've had the benefit of watching. We just didn't do it corporately. We kind of did it by accident. Yeah, sure, it'd be great. Well, let's jump on this. We did it. We never formalized it. We never really captured it, recognized the value and benefit that could be done as a holistic program tool. So that's what you're seeing with this here. In essence, short, sweet, and to the point on this is we, as Mike and others have described, we want to be out in front of everything. We want to look at the issues. We want to try to capture this as well as any potential opportunities. Right now, we're in a certain market where we might be able to get by without 404 impediments or regulations on several of our wash crossings. Go and go fast. That might be our recommendation on that. That might be a simple summary report, a document. Product is going to be determined based on what we find and what we work with the jurisdictions on this, but it will be a collaborative effort and say what provides you the best benefit for you now to kick loose your project teams and turn them into production. So that's why you're seeing that in there, is we're out there to identify, analyze, and make resolution or resolve or recommend any of these types of activities that we think are going to get in the way. Next one, Issa. So the key tasks on this, we've really got three major efforts that we're going to be focusing on with the solicitation, which, by the way, we're putting the finishing touches on. We're working with our legal team now to do their final review of everything. So I expect it will probably be coming out and hit the streets in the next week to 2 weeks is our goal and time frame on this. We've done the lion's share of the work. We've got everything in place, and we're making sure we put all the bells and whistles around it. The advanced project investigation. Specifically, we want to look at the high priority period 1 jobs that have the suitable complexity. So Silver Bell Road, 22nd Street West, as you heard referenced, in Thornydale. Just to see if those have opportunities, issues, challenges, all the things we're talking about, plus maybe things we aren't talking about, and saying what could potentially get in the way. We know what we've traditionally been bogged down by. Well, what else can be out there that we might want to jump on, take advantage of, and that will allow everything to go into accelerated production mode. The second major task on there is going to be delivery analysis. And this is identifying all the things we're talking about, which we know, but the things we aren't running into. Resource constraints. Where's the bottlenecks going to be? I've sat through enough project discussions and with enough project teams and jurisdictions. There are various ones out there. As you heard, we're going to quadruple our workload. So what works today, handled by 2 or 3 folks, when you quadruple that, we got a bottleneck. So what's that going to look like? Where's that going to be? How can we get advance notice on that? We also want to look at, this drives me, everybody in this room has heard me talk about it, cost trends. We're great about explaining why a cost increase went up. We're horrible about anticipating it. How can we get stronger in that? How can we get a preview of that? How can we make sure project teams are incorporating some aspect that reflects what we're seeing, what we're watching, how things are behaving, cost escalation factors, increases in insurance rates by the the contracting community, all those kind of things that we know are out there, and then wind up having to document. How can we be in front of that? And then delivery method recommendations. As we've all talked about, we know we're going to have to utilize different means and methods on this. Some jurisdictions use those to different degrees, different sources, but how can we make sure we're doing that holistically, completely, and where can we use the resource benefits to maximize that on top of all the other things? So how do we look at the projects? How do we look at the program? And how do we blend those together? We also looked at this, and in the interest of doing this time-wise, we talked about this and said, okay, let's jump this. We got to get the first effort out there. Let's get this underway so it provides the benefit, and let's use that to now as a pilot almost. Because we're going to want to look at these projects as we're hearing about in periods 2, 3, and 4 as well. This is not an isolated situation. How can we help this throughout the whole course of the program? So we're going to be building for a secondary effort that'll come out probably within 1 year to 2 years, and say that'll look more holistically at everything. We're jump starting it with the team we got going on now, which is why it's been accelerated so much. But we're going to want to keep this in place, look at the bigger projects in the outer years, and make sure we've got that same set of eyes, ears, and view on everything else like that. That's all I got. Those were 2 slides to hit upon that and to kind of follow on the overall conversation on that. I think Mike hit upon a couple of the key things, which is going to be, we're going to want to make sure that whatever teams we select are not precluded from proposing on yours. That's why we're working so closely with our legal groups on that, because we want to make sure we're not limiting anything. That's the whole purpose of this, is it's got to be complementary efforts that don't duplicate, not prohibitive efforts that wind up precluding anything. With that, I can answer any additional questions if there are any. Otherwise, that completes my presentation. Thank you, Jim.
Thank you, Rick. Madam Chair, just, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see it. I apologize. Thank you.
Rick, I apologize if you covered this already in a previous meeting, but where does the funding for this advanced delivery come out of? The project budgets for each one of these?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
Madam Chair. So as Rick was outlining that, I was writing down the different types of folks or expertise that'll be important. Jurisdiction is one. So we're going to ask for the jurisdiction to assign someone to help with this. So be thinking about that as well, just so that they're kind of like your ears and eyes on this, so that there's an opportunity to, you know, they can flag things that we might not be sensitive to. We're also looking for construction folks, you know, folks about the constructability. So we've got some retired contractor types that are interested in maybe helping, and so we're going to be looking at that as well. Utilities, we already talked about. Railroad, I think that's a pretty specific area, and I don't know, we'll have them on all the teams, but we'll certainly look at that as something. But then there's also the cultural and environmental. You know, there's that component, and that's not just environmental or cultural in terms of cultural resource, but that's also the neighborhoods, you know, potential political issues around alignments, those kinds of things that we'll make sure that are incorporated. So that's all on that one, Madam Chair.
Madam Chair and Mike and Rick, appreciate the information on it, and just want to touch on one of the last comments that Rick made, is that, you know, this is complementary. And so Silver Bell is a great example. And so we're having conversations, all of us understand the complexity of that project. So county talking to Marana, internally, our teams, our cultural resources folks, our transportation, our project delivery, construction and delivery team. And so anything that we can do to ensure that, you know, we're dovetailed on this is going to be helpful, so that we don't expend effort and resources doing the same things in two different places is going to be important. And so, you know, I thought I heard Rick say that you're ready to go out to RFP next week, and I just want to confirm, you know, time frame on that. And I you know, would appreciate a look at what's included in the scope, right, to make sure that we're aligned in terms of how we're approaching it. Thank you.
Rick, what we'll do is we'll shoot that to the city for 22nd, the county for Silver Bell, and Thornydale's at the county as well. I think it is. Yeah. Yeah. So let's do that. Thanks.
Just, no, I'm sorry. Hey, Rick, just one, you mentioned cost trends, and I get it. It's important to kind of keep up with what's changing for us going forward. But one of the biggest frustrations I always had with project management was getting updated estimates. I mean, consultants are good about advancing, you know, through their own, you know, areas of well, where they have conflicts or have challenges, but you ask them for a, you know, interim kind of a project estimate, and it's like, I just have the same number you started with, you know? So that's where I see a need to really concentrate, because you talk about these quarterly updates, and I think you're going to need some regular updating of those estimates, and they're not easy to do, but I think they're necessary.
Good point. Thanks.
So, Madam Chair, before we get into the committee restructuring, I think we've covered everything else. Wanted to just maybe pick your brains on what you've seen here, and any, I mean, we've been having the open dialogue. You can see how we're trying to organize ourselves around all of these pieces. And there, as I mentioned early on, the complexity of this is pretty significant. But I'm curious if you have any other thoughts or any other pieces that we should be looking at that we may not have identified already. Is there anything out there that you can think of that might be a challenge, either from a delivery standpoint or some kind of impediment that we may have missed in this?
Terry.
I don't know anything additional in terms of potential challenges. I'll just say what I started off saying at the beginning of the meeting, and that is kudos to you and the staff for the amount of work that's already gone into this. And I think it really establishes a great framework for us from which to work. And yeah, is there going to be some tweaks as we go along here? Absolutely. But I think the structure, the framework, the detail that's going into this is going to help us be successful in the end. And so I really appreciate where we're at already at this stage of the game with the RTA just having passed, a month ago, a little over a couple of months ago. So great job to your team.
What might help us, piggybacking on to what John said, is the possibility of maybe keeping some type of a RTA database on unit costs. That way we can apply that for projects as they move forward. We can keep track of inflation. We can just start, just again, all working on that same sheet of music.
Excuse me, Mike. Just as far as project schedule delivery, I think I don't know if any of these projects are going to have a federal component as well. So that's always a delay. So, you have to identify those early and incorporate that element into your schedule as well. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just want to let you know, so one of the things you're going to hear a lot is, the detail trickles down. We are really trying hard to shift any federal dollars that we get to the TIs, to the state projects, basically, because those are all federalized anyway. And I'm trying really hard to keep from having to do any federal work on any other projects that are RTA projects other than those. And so you're going to hear us do a lot of swapping. We'll swap federal money from this project over here to use TPT, which has more flexibility but doesn't have the same requirements. Because we recognize that, Jason, that's a great point. But I want to let you know, so kind of giving you a heads up that when you hear that, that's the spirit and intent is we want to reduce the amount of federalized projects or eliminate, quite frankly, on the non-state projects as best we can. So you're going to hear that quite a bit. Thank you. Okay, so wanted to give you an overview. I think Sheila's going to be here to chat about this. As you might recall from a previous meeting, I think it was in March, with the Regional Council and the RTA Board, they asked about the committee structures, and they were very interested in how those work or don't. And so we have a quick presentation here to outline for you how these currently operate and how we're proposing that they operate, and maybe some changes. So go ahead, Sheila.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the TMC. At its January meeting, the Regional Council requested we examine the PAG RTA committee structure, and both the management and the Regional Council received a high-level overview of the current structure at their March meetings. This slide shows the current committee flow chart and the most recent reporting structure. And in the next slide, you'll see a proposed new reporting structure. While the TPC and EPAC have been reporting directly to the executive director in the recent past, their work also is communicated to the management committee. And here you also see that the CART committee was reporting directly to the executive director. This proposed new committee org chart shows a more streamlined approach to the standing committee structure. The main difference in the org chart shown here from the previous slide is that the TPC and EPAC report directly to management, and management reports directly to the Regional Council. And for the RTA, the TMC and the CART committee both will report directly to the RTA board. In addition, staff proposes the PAG RTA standing committees shown will meet quarterly or as directed to seek action on a matter. This upcoming reporting committee structure will be outlined in a proposed uniform committee bylaws document that is being drafted, one for RTA committees and one for PAG committees. The bylaws in place for the Regional Council and the RTA board will remain intact. This shows the current subcommittees, the working groups, the special committees and task forces for PAG and the RTA, and which committees they report to or committee. The proposal is for these groups to meet as assigned to address action items that align with the overall work program, the RTA plan, or any other federal or state requirements. And an overview of the role of the PAG RTA committees. As an overview, we will run through the purpose, the value, and the expectations. The purpose primarily is for the committees to recommend policy and action, and a couple of examples shown there, of course, are the RTA Administrative Code or the PAG 2055 RMAP. The value that the respective committee members bring will be based on their expertise in the areas shown. The regional expectations continue to focus on the regional council's approved overall work program vision and goals and the RTA ballot administrative code. An overarching foundational expectation, which is tied to PAG's mission, is to work collaboratively for the benefit of the region, particularly to advance our quality of life. And the primary goal of the restructuring is to introduce time efficiencies, giving the additional workload we will all have ahead of us to deliver the RTA program. In addition to the proposed uniform committee bylaws mentioned earlier, each committee would have a charter to define the new reporting structure, membership, meeting schedule, quorum requirements, etc. And in addition, collaborative meetings could occur as needed for the beneficial ongoing communication and collaboration efforts. And all of these committees would still continue to be subject to the open meeting law. As part of the interest in streamlining the committee work, staff proposes that the work of the TIP subcommittee be consolidated under the TPC. And under the new model, the TPC can extend its agenda to address TIP development work in addition to other TPC activities. Apart from TPC, EPAC, TMC, and the CART committee, we propose the other committees would all be referred to as working groups going forward. And finally, we are seeking direction from you today to bring the draft uniform bylaws and individual committee charters back to you this fall for your review. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
I'll just say, I remember when I started in this position, going through the website to identify all the committees and the subcommittees, and then identify who from the county was working on each of those. And it was about half of the employees, I think, of the county. So I think I'm very excited with the direction we're going. I think this provides for a real streamlined process to make sure that we don't just, we're actually spending our time with people in a committee, getting information and not just having them meet all the time in one different permutation or the other. So thank you for the work we've gotten.
Madam Chair, I think what will be important there going forward will be how we assign tasks to the committees, if you will. And the reason we went to we'll call it the master bylaw is simply so that it's like the master IGA, right? You know, it gives us this governance structure, but then the specific committees will have their own charters to identify what their role might be. I can tell you that this might come across like we're not interested in feedback from committees. That's not the case. As a matter of fact, it's the opposite. We want to just hone their time because we're all going to be really focused and pretty busy on all the things that we've talked about. And so we want to make sure that we've streamlined and they can, quite frankly, plan. You know, they can plan when we're going to meet and the agendas will be efficient and we'll get to it. And one of the things that I didn't say is all of the agendas will have requests for future agenda items. So that way there's an opportunity for folks to bring up issues that can be discussed within the purview. But that way there's an opportunity to have open dialogue.
Well, and I'll also say I found at times that I discovered that bylaws had been changed or amended, and I hadn't realized that occurred. So I think master committee bylaws helps us all understand what the rules are and know if and when they're going to be changed at some point. And I absolutely appreciate that we report to the boards. Thank you. Sam, did you, Sam?
Do we
Bob?
need a big formal action on this? or
We're
do you
looking
have
for a
some-
recommendation. This will go to the board. This won't go to them until, or the regional council until September.
Because we
But
need to actually see,
Want to make sure that you're okay with this concept, and if you could give us some general guidance that, yeah, you're good with it, then we'll go down the path. Otherwise, we'll rethink our strategy there.
Bob.
Madam Chair, yeah, this is a general observation. I think it's on the timeliness of where you're restructuring position of the RTA executive director now in the TMC and the CART going directly to the RTA board. The timeliness of where the executive director provided, direction and response and actions now appears to be that it's got to go to the board and then come back to each of these positions. And I'm just making a comment. I just think it's a timeliness issue where the executive director provided a little more response.
Madam Chair, maybe I can help with that, Bob. So the intent here is not that the TMC's got to go to the board and then come back to the director. The spirit and intent here is that the executive director will not filter information that either goes to the board or that is presented on agendas. And so that way it's very clear in that hierarchy that there is a direct line, particularly for the Citizens Oversight Group, to be honest with you. That group needs to be directly accountable, if you will, to the board with no filtering from the staff.
This raises an old topic for me, and that was the effort that we had underway with the development, the RTA Next, where Terry and I were supposed to be kind of liaisons to the CAC, and it never really happened. But I get where Bob's coming from, because I don't think you as executive director want any surprises when these two committees report to the RTA board. So we're going to have some communication between those bodies.
Madam Chair, so keep in mind, John, that the RTA, well, the CART and the TMC meet in open session. So unless you're going to have a minority opinion to stand up and talk, but they wouldn't be talking on behalf of the TMC or the CART, they'd be talking on behalf of themselves, right? So again, the spirit and intent here is to make sure there's no filtering of information and there's no control, if you will, of how the committees are organized or structured or the topics that they're talking about, and they're making recommendations to the board. And I will tell you that I've told the staff, it could very well be that the committee will make a recommendation to the board or to the council, and there could be a different staff recommendation. And that's okay. I mean, we as professionals, we know that could be the case, and say, I disagree with the committee's recommendation. They're recommending this. As the director, I'm recommending this, but it's up to you as policymakers to make that call.
Mike, I think this makes a lot of sense in terms of what you're proposing here. I think it resonates well with some conversations that we've had over the past year. The TMC should be a direct advisory board or committee to the board. Same with the Citizens Advisory Group. They should be direct advisory groups to the board. I think I hear the concern, and perhaps it's just how it's depicted on this map, on the organization chart. If you go back.
Go ahead and put that back up. I think it's the org chart. That one.
Yeah, so if it was just depicted where these advisory groups have a direct line to the governing body, but as the RTA director, you have a hash line to each of those advisory groups that depicts a flow of communication that's happening. And I've seen that on org charts plenty of times as well. And it shows that there's communication flow between staff and these advisory groups, but these advisory groups are directly link to the board. So
We could put a dash line, we could even put a solid line, quite frankly, between the executive director, the TMC and the card committee as well. But I like it. It's just a way to make sure that it's clear. It's not
so
singular.
flow.
It's,
Yeah.
it's not singular. It's
Not linear, it's
yeah, it's not
more.
linear.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I would entertain a motion that we recommend that we recommend this proposed restructuring and direct staff to work on the draft bylaws. For
So-
consideration, thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any? Terry? And Sam, thank you. Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So you keep it in mind, because of the development of the project charters, that's also a place where we can put what the role of the executive director is. So thanks to Jeanette for the tidbit on that. So Madam Chair, that really concludes what we wanted to cover today and talk about. I had told you all that you'd be here till at least noon, or at least 11:45. So you have to sit here for another 45 minutes. But a couple things I wanted to summarize for you, and I forgive my manners. I'm a bull in a china shop when it comes to this stuff. I should have introduced Greg Byers, who is currently sitting in the back of the room. This will be the last time you will see him sitting in the back of the room. In the future, he will be sitting around this table. So Greg, for those of you who don't know him, you can stand up and wave. We're trying to cure him of that tie that he wears, but he brings some professionals into the group, that's for sure. But as you know, Greg was the deputy director at ADOT. We're pretty excited about having him on board. He's got strong project delivery as well as executive level management. And so pretty excited about having him on board. The last thing is, again, to thank you for all the energy and effort that you all have put forth, your staff. Have been great to work with in terms of all of this stuff. And I appreciate the comments that we heard today. We'll certainly take notes on that, and we'll incorporate that. So I had hoped that we would have a similar conversation with the RTA board and the management council on June 4th. Unfortunately, schedules don't work that well, and I'd really like to have all of them there, and they're not able to. So we're already into September of 2030. No, I'm kidding. Trying to find a time has been really a monumental task. So we're already into late July. And so we may even go into August at this point, but I'm okay with it. None of it is really hot and pressing, in terms of the conversation. But if you could help and convey to your bosses the magnitude of what we're dealing with here, and have them, or feel free to reach out and chat if they have concerns, or if they want to get more information, happy to go. And I can go and meet with them individually. We scheduled our usual updates as well. But if there's anything that you all need from us to convey to them what we're up to, we're happy to do that. So with that, Madam Chair, thank you for your patience with us today. Very much appreciated. And thanks to the staff. Thanks to the staff.
Mike, just a question for you. The June 4th meeting June 4th is not a board retreat. It's just a regular PAG regional
That's
council.
correct.
RTA.
It's just a regular meeting. We do have some business to discuss there. We've got a few items that need to be addressed, but it will not be the retreat. The retreat will be in hopefully in July, but it's probably looking like August. One other topic, did you want to bring it up? Okay.
I would just mention, and we can chat about it when we start to look at the bylaws. One thing that we've talked about, so I think, we have some of the leadership, the chair, I think is it current bylaws, that it bounces between Pima County and the city of Tucson. What we've been chatting about is perhaps lining it up so whoever is the chair of the PAG Regional Council or the RTA Board, the chair of either the PAG Management Committee or the RTA Technical Committee aligns with that mayor or chairs, so that we're moving around all the leadership amongst and between the group, and that it lines up. It's probably, if it's your mayor or your board chair or board representative who's chairing it, they're going to come back and talk to you, and that we have some of that alignment. So I think about that, and we can talk about that at some of the next meetings, but maybe tie that into some of the bylaw amendments.
Happy to do that. I'll look at the schedule for that when that's going to happen. All I heard was you don't want to be chair anymore. So that's what I heard. But we'll make sure that that happens as a part of that update. And I think, as I recall, the committee chairs are established in January, usually for the coming year. So we'll make sure that for the next iteration of that, we'll have a different structure. I think that's a great idea, to be honest. It's easy.